Hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Today is Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. I appreciate you tuning in. This is Spoken Truth Revolution with Matt O'Connell. I'm your host, Matt O'Connell. So appreciate you tuning in. As always, appreciate your engagement on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Make sure you follow us and share our content and keep speaking up no matter where you are at your school board meetings or meetings, town halls, etc. Takes each and every one of us in our spheres of influence to make sure the message of truth gets out there, the message of freedom, the message of Christian principles and virtue. Those all tied together makes our society great. And so with that being said, a couple things I want to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the border crisis. We're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter and vaccine mandates. And we have some information that you may find interesting related to the past lab leaks that have occurred in China, believe it or not. You never hear about that. And then some other things that'll, hopefully, if we have time, we'll talk about them. If not, we'll push it off to next week. But let's start with the border crisis. So as you know, there is a significant issue with the border right now. It's being neglected by the Biden administration. Biden and Kamala Harris, the president, vice president of the United States of America, knowing that there is a crisis at the southern border that they are responsible for, they have not even visited the border. However, they'll go and fly over to California and campaign on behalf of Governor Newsom in his recall election, but they won't take another, couple 100 miles trek down to the southern border to see how things are going in Texas. But needless to say, there's a couple things that I want to talk about with this. We have, as you probably have seen on social media and the media, this one image of a Border Patrol agent trying to apprehend an illegal immigrant. Looks like he's carrying some type of takeout. And interestingly enough, it looks like he's laughing. Now, I don't know if he's laughing, but the image is quite interesting to perceive. And the Border Patrol agent is leaning over. You see his long rein hanging down, and the Border Patrol agent is grabbing the immigrant's shirt, because that's what the Border Patrol is supposed to do. They're supposed to patrol the border, and if there's anybody crossing illegally, they are to apprehend those individuals. And they use horses, not because horses are racist, or cowboy hats are racist, or he's a white man. If you want to, start diving into the intersectionality of it all, he's a white man on a horse wearing a cowboy hat, trying to apprehend a Haitian black man. And this is like a perfect scenario for all the critical race theory folks out there who, again, their primary job is to look at the world through a racist lens. And so if you look at the world through that particular worldview to try to find racism in every situation, guess what is going to happen? You will find racism and racists in every situation. Even if they're not racist, even if there's no evidence of racism, you as a critical race theorist will find it. And so anyways, I digress, but let's talk about this. So we know there's back and forth. The left is saying, hey, the Border Patrol agent is trying to whip this black man. This is what they did in the times of slavery, so on and so forth. There's no evidence of that. I'm sure if this Haitian man were to come forward and to see, prove that he was being whipped, he'd likely have some scars or some markings of the whip. So I encourage him to come forward, but we'll see about that. But we see this picture, and we have President Biden. We have a clip of him. So let's run the clip, and let's see what President Biden had to say about this particular photo here.
Holding.
Of course, I take responsibility. I'm president, but it was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you, those people will pay. They will be, an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences. It's an embarrassment, but it's beyond an embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. It sends the wrong message around the world. It sends the wrong message at home. It's simply not who we are.
So without having any information, objective information, not knowing exactly what's going on, because Biden isn't down there, and frankly, he's a houseplant in the White House. He just sits there and just lets things go to metaphorically crap, right? So he lets things go to crap, and it goes to crap to a certain point where things start to get out of control, and the left tries to time certain pictures so that they can or try to wait for something to mess up to then blame the issue on the other group or to call it racism or what have you. So it's like they allow chaos to happen, and then they create more chaos by causing more division by labeling something racist, which they often do. So we know President Biden's position on it. Let's read from the New York Post here. It says this. So President Biden vowed Friday that U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback who try to stop illegal Haitian immigrants from crossing the Rio Grande will pay, quote unquote, even though the photographer who captured the activity said his images have been misconstrued. So that's what the photographer said, mind you. Amid unfounded claims, the reins were used as whips. The head of the Border Patrol union calls Biden's comments totally outrageous amid fury from Republican lawmakers who accuse the president of throwing his own law enforcement officers under the bus to deflect from the massive migrant crisis that erupted in Del Rio, Texas. So it goes on, but then there's some more. Again, it's interesting that even the photographer who took the picture, and they had different angles of this picture, and you could see that there was no whips being whipped. It was the Border Patrol agent doing his job, patrolling the border, apprehending any individual crossing the border illegally, trying to apprehend them. And so apparently horses are racist, white men on horses are racist, and white men on horses wearing cowboy hats are racist now as well. So I think the first thing, as I mentioned before, that caught my attention looking at this photo is the guy is clearly not getting whipped. It's impossible for the Border Patrol agent to whip him. He's holding onto one rein and he's grabbing the Haitian illegal immigrant, the man carrying the carryout, with his other hand. And it's that's point number one. Point number two, he is carrying carryout, which is interesting. I don't know where at the southern border. There's not a whole lot of amenities down there, so it's interesting. He's carrying carryout, and he's almost has a joyful countenance on him, which is interesting. But those are just my observations of the photo. So, do I see racism as what the left would see? I don't see racism. I don't see racism at all. So why is this happening? So it's almost, as I mentioned before, why is this happening? Why is the southern border going to crap? Why is Biden now really only taking a strong stance against the Border Patrol agents versus taking a strong stance of securing the border? That's a question we should all be asking and what the media is asking. Why is the Biden administration taking a stronger stance against his Border Patrol agents who are doing their job versus a strong stance with a secure border? That's a question only Biden can answer. But I do have a speculation. It's almost as if Biden and his administration want things to get so bad that they're waiting for the tiniest mistake or what may appear to be a mistake and exploit that for their leftist agenda as what we're seeing. They're calling this racist, right? They're calling this is our example of systematic racism, and it's not. There's no way to prove it. And again, this happened in Afghanistan. This happened with the lockdowns, with the vaccine mandate. So Biden's strategy is to put people in a corner and then magnify any potential mistake, the people that he puts in a corner, any mistake they may make based on him trying to force something upon them. And we see that over and over again. He never truly resolves issues. He just creates issues. President Biden creates issues and then never resolves them. And then he creates a new issue to make you forget about the old issue that he formerly created. And this process keeps going and going and going. They create a new crisis, a new crisis, a new crisis. And then the Biden administration and the Democrats, they hope that you forget those past crises that they created. And so they're going to run out of time, though, because the American people will not forget. I will not forget. You will not forget for sure. And so Yeah, and I think the other point is we're trying to, if you want to try to understand, this is a good example of trying to understand folks who believe in critical race theory as it relates to this particular discussion that surrounds this photo. Anything in this life, if you're a critical race theorist, the critical race theory, you have to look at life through a racist lens. There's no other lens to look at life through. In order to discover racism in a society, in a system, you need to look at each law, each action, each structure, each institution with a racist presumption that it is racist. And this is a perfect example. This image, everything about it is a perfect example to help us understand critical race theorists, because that's really all they see the world. They see the world, they see people, they presume people's actions are racist. And if you don't believe that your actions are racist, then you're denying that you're racist. So it's complete absurdity. There's no logic behind it. It's really a faith. You need a lot of faith to believe in the aspects of critical race theory to try to prove that theory to be true in real life. All right, the next story we have is from Breitbart. A Black Lives Matter leader calls vaccine mandates racist, promises uprising against ID system. Quite interesting seeing Black Lives Matter step up. And so let me dive into the story. So it says this: New York City's vaccine mandate began on September 13th. It requires proof of vaccination entry to certain public spaces, including gyms, restaurants, and bars, unless a person has an approved medical exemption. Hawk Newsom, the co-founder and chairman of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, argues the mandates are fundamentally racist given the low rate of vaccination in the Black community. Some 85.6% of Black people in the state of New York remain without one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, according to state data. I think in a perfect world, vaccine requirements should be business by business, but it could be a slippery slope. So the mandate should be removed completely, Newsom told the Washington Examiner. It's not going to be white men in suits on Wall Street who are going to get stopped. There's such hypocrisy in this thing. And so interestingly enough, let me also preface it with this. I fundamentally disagree with nearly everything Black Lives Matter represents. Let me repeat that. I fundamentally disagree with everything Black Lives Matter represents. I disagree with their ideology. I disagree with their social stances. They are a Marxist organization, which is antithetical to Christianity. I disagree with their proposal of dismantling the nuclear family. I think a lot of the problems in any society, any demographic, especially the Black community, the results or the reason why there's so many, the crime rate is high, the drug use is high, any demographic you look into, if there is a dismemberment of the nuclear family, there is an increase of crime. There's an increase of homelessness. There's an increase of children not graduating from high school. So there's so many things related to what I disagree with related to Black Lives Matter. However, I agree with everything that Black Lives Matter is saying about the vaccine. Yes, the vaccine mandate is discriminatory. And you can even slice and dice the data of who is vaccinated by demographic and who is not. And you can prove the fact that, yes, not just all unvaccinated people will be marginalized, but specifically Black people will be marginalized more so because most Black people, as the statistic shows, I think it's around a little over 10%, only a little over 10% of the Black community. I think even this is just identifying in the state of New York. It says only 85% of 85.6% of the Black people in the state of New York are without a COVID vaccine. dosage, so whether the first or second dose. But I think it's even lower than that nationally. I think the vaccine rate for the Black community is only at like 10% if you look on the CDC. So yes, these mandates will certainly discriminate against the Black community 100%. This is like, so, we talk about Black Lives Matter talks about a lot about systematic racism, which I entirely disagree with. There are too many social dynamic factors that go into play as far as why does X group of people result in prison or don't graduate from high school, or the list really, really goes on, and it's really hard to identify one specific thing that is a result of those poor and sad statistics. But this is front and center. Like literally people will be turned away because they are not vaccinated. That isn't just for the Black community. It will impact them more because more folks in the Black community are not vaccinated. But any individual that is not vaccinated, this particular law, this mandate does discriminate against. And again, it's not just a matter of going into certain stores or restaurants, but now due to Biden's vaccine mandate for businesses that have 100 or more employees, in which if you're a business, you're either going to get fined $14,000, you're going to have to pay for weekly testing, which is a lot of money as well. Or if not, likely the business, it would be hard to try to absorb that cost if your employees don't, or specific employees don't want to get vaccinated. So the likeliness is that individual is going to be fired from their job. So yes, this is 100% racist. It's discriminatory for sure. I don't think that the Biden administration thought this one through because it certainly does affect the Black community more than any community as well. But I think I don't like to look in terms of black, white, so on and so forth. We're all equal under the law. This is a discrimination based on those who are vaccinated and those who are unvaccinated. And it boils down to freedom, and it boils down to, do I need the vaccine? My demographic, I'm 35 years old. I'm in great shape. I have good health. I eat well. That is my vaccine against coronavirus. I exercise every single day. I play with my kids. I eat good. I've been building up my body to fight any virus that comes my way. I'm not going to be negligent if a virus comes out and there's a 50% death rate. I think we would be foolish to try to be arrogant enough to say, I don't need the vaccine because of my immune system and my health is so great. But again, we have to look in view of context of the death rate of COVID. My demographic, I have a 99.885% chance of surviving COVID if I get COVID. And so, do I need a vaccine? Is my life in complete risk where I could definitely die from COVID? No, I think even if it was a 10% death rate of COVID, I would likely get the vaccine. But we're talking about a fraction of a percentage here now. So anyways, not to dive too deep into that, but I thought it was interesting. And I hope Black Lives Matter continues to step up and we look at the data together. And I think sometimes given the nature of Black Lives Matter, I'd be curious to see how it plays out and how the politicians will respond to this. So we shall see how this goes and how the politicians respond to this particular claim by the Black Lives Matter leader, Hawk Newsom. All right, next up, we have some articles, and I was chatting with a friend earlier or late last week regarding some articles, and he sent me over two articles. One is dated from in 2019. The second is dated 2017, and both indicate how the U.S. gradually lifted the ability for different countries, including the U.S., to experiment with very contagious viruses. So let me read one of the articles, and then we'll do some comment about it as well, some commentary. 2014, U.S. officials imposed a moratorium on experiments to enhance some of the world's most lethal viruses by making them transmissible by air, responding to widespread concerns that a lab accident could spark a global pandemic. That sounds kind of familiar. Let's continue on. Most infectious disease studies pose modest safety risks, but given that these proposed experiments, intended to create a highly contagious flu virus that could spread among humans, the government concluded the work should not go on until it could be approved through a specially created vigorous review process that considered the dangers. So this article, as mentioned, was written before we knew about, almost a year before we found out about COVID-19. And the U.S. was already in the process before COVID-19 was, whether it was released intentionally or accidentally, it was released. And this article was written almost a year beforehand. Okay, here's the second article. U.S. lifts bans on lethal virus experiments despite security risks. This is December 2017. This is when this article was written by the BBC. The U.S. government has lifted a 3-year ban on making lethal viruses in the lab, saying the potential benefits of disease preparedness outweigh the risks. Labs will now be able to manufacture strains of influenza, SARS, and Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS. The ban was imposed following safety breaches at federal institutions involving anthrax and avian flu. Now a scientific review panel will have to greenlight each research proposal. It will only be allowed to go ahead if the panel determines there is no safer way to conduct the research and that the benefits it will provide justify the risks. Critics say such gain of function research still risks creating an accidental pandemic. This is interesting. This is almost, these two articles are almost prophetic, nearly to the T of what occurred in 2020. It also says this. Now, the U.S. National Institute of Health says it is time to ban on funding such research with the introduction of new safeguards. So, in other words, who was the head of the National Institute of Health? Dr. Fauci, NIH head. He's the lead. He's the leader of that organization. He, in other words, he probably gave the stamp of approval for this statement that it is time to lift the ban on funding such research with the introduction of new safeguards. And so what's really interesting is the timing. The timing of these articles are quite peculiar. We have, again, the BBC one was dated for 2017, and the Washington Post one was dated for 2019. So almost at least a couple years before the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. And so some of the information is coming out, but it's being smothered by the other crises that it seems like the Biden administration is nearly creating on their own. We have, the vaccine mandates. We have the Afghanistan crisis, the pullout there, terrible pullout. And then we have the southern border crises there. It's almost like they're trying to create a storm of crises, so much smoke, so many mirrors, where no one is even talking about the potential lab leak theory from the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. And so do you think it's important to get to the bottom of this? Ask yourself that question. Do you think it's important to get to the bottom of this? I personally think we should. And I hope we do. But we know for a fact the following. So this is interesting. So this is an NIH report produced May 22nd, 2004. So it's titled, Breaches of Safety Regulations Are Probable Cause of Recent SARS Outbreak, WHO says. So the World Health Organization has confirmed that breaches of safety procedures on at least 2 occasions at one of Beijing's top virology laboratories were the probable cause of the outbreak of severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, there last month, which infected 9 people, one of whom died. However, initial fears that the outbreak would spread as a result of the surge in travel during the Golden Week holiday at the beginning of May seem to have been unfounded. So I'll continue on in the article. It says this is the third outbreak of SARS to have been traced to a laboratory. Small outbreaks occurred in Taiwan, Singapore last year. The WHO may call for a containment policy for SARS to reduce the number of samples of the virus and the number of laboratories handling it, said Dr. Hall. So what's concerning is that when people were talking about the lab leak in Wuhan, it's like, this would never happen. And you had all the scientific journals. This would never happen. We have. Look at all the scientists who have signed in this scientific journal. We are of the science. We are the science, and you must comply. You must agree with us. You are a conspiracy theorist if you think otherwise. And it's like they would label us as conspiracy theorists if we were kind of like thinking objectively about, hey, COVID-19 was found relatively close to a virology lab, like a couple 100 yards away. It's like, putting two to two together. But it is arrogant and it is reckless for these individuals to be held and to hold such responsibility that can affect the entire world. And they need to be held to account for what they did. This can happen because it has happened, and it's happened multiple times. And this is an NIH article that confirms that there has been lab leaks in the past. And why is the media not talking about the past lab leaks? I mean, don't you think that would be a topic of discussion as we're all being affected by COVID-19? Hundreds of thousands, millions of people throughout the world have died from COVID. And now we're seeing these tyrannical leftist oppressive governments taking control of citizens' freedoms. Don't you think the media and even the politicians would speak out about the fact that this is not the first time a virus has been leaked from a lab? What do you say about it? Because I think we need to get to the bottom of it for sure. And so with that being said, I just thought that was interesting, some food for thought. Share it if you want, because no one is talking about the former past lab leaks. And it should be discussed, because how do you learn and be better as a society and not make the same mistakes as the past if you're just trying to smother up the past because you've been reckless? Unfortunately, I won't have time to get to the other two topics I wanted to talk about this week, but hey, I hope you have an amazing week. Just go be kind to someone today. Tell them that you love them. Call that person you haven't talked to in a long time. Tell them that you're thinking about them, that you love them, and keep up the great work. It takes each and every one of us to make a big change in our culture. It starts with you. It starts with you. Have a great day. God bless. Bye-bye.